Hi everybody, Joel from JST Woodcraft here. Welcome to my shop. So a good friend of mine, Steven Antonucci, a very accomplished and successful turner and a member of my local turning club, he likes to do these drop spindles and bowls and whatnot where he fills the gaps with little dots, and these dots are hard to see because I have them cast here. But basically what we did is he glued these dots onto a pen tube for a Vertex Click pen, and then I cast the dots in liquid diamonds. I chose liquid diamonds for this project because it stays viscous much longer, or fluid much longer than the Alumilites would. So I'm hoping that fluidity, in addition to being under pressure for 24 hours, really filled all the voids. And as you can see at the end here, it looks like we've had success, and you can actually see some of the dots were a little longer than the tube, and they were sanded off during the process. So process of barrel trimming. So this was cast in the Cast Right system from Signature Pen Supply. This would not fit in a traditional demold cast because the width of the dots, and I didn't want to sand the dots down too much and put all that stress on them while they were hanging out there by themselves with no resin around them to protect them. And this just seemed to be a good fit for this project, so this is what we did. So it looks all nice and shiny because there's a clear plastic tube on the outside here that we're going to churn off. So I'm going to get this loaded up on the lathe, and we're going to get this churned up, and we'll get churning. One of the things that I traditionally do, and you've seen this in a lot of my videos, is when I do churning of acrylics, you'll usually see me use my round carbide cutter. So this is pretty much my tool of choice. So I'll either use this tool from Easy Wood Tools. I will also often go to this magic skew, which rides, and I have a video about this, which rides on the tool rest at a little bit of an angle. And this is from tshadow.com. Both great tools for doing what I'm normally doing, but my concern is with these types of tools, they're scraping tools, and as you can see in here, I have dots which are these are aluminum tubes. Get the video. These are aluminum tubes filled with polymer clay. So I'm a little worried that a scraping tool is going to really hit these aluminum pieces hard and create an undue amount of stress on this. So today's work is going to be with the much maligned skew. I have this skew here. I have a much smaller skew that you'll also see me use. These have to be crazy sharp in order for you to have good success in churning the acrylic. So if you're not good at sharpening your tools before you engage in some type of project like this, I highly recommend you getting some help in getting your tools sharpened. All right, so I'm going to pause the video here. We're going to get this put on the lathe, and we're going to get to work. All right, so we've got the blank loaded on the lathe. I have my churn between center set up here, and the appropriate size bushings for the Vertex Click pen. A couple things that I'm just going to talk about real quick before we get started. My dust collection system makes a fair amount of noise, so I will do my best to talk over it, but I apologize if I'm hard to hear during the video. If I find any places that's something important I don't think you can hear me, I'll definitely add text to the video. We're also here in New Jersey. It's 12 degrees outside, it's snowing, and it's a little cool in the shop, so you're going to hear the fan from my shop heater coming off and on too. So I apologize for all these crazy noises, but it's part of life in the Northeast. All right, so let's get this started. We're going to start off with our big skew, and I churn these things really fast. So I have my lathe set up for its fastest setting, and I feel that gives you the best cut. Now, since this tube is completely round, what I expect to see coming off of here are ribbons. I don't want to see chipping. If you're seeing chipping when you're churning acrylics, you either got your tool is not sharp enough, you're not holding it at the right angle, or you're not spinning the lathe fast enough. But chipping is an indication that something bad is about to happen. So if you're seeing that, take a step back, figure out what's wrong, and make your corrections. And let's get started. Hopefully this goes well. I think one other thing, this is the first time we've done something like this, so I have no idea what the outcome is going to look like. Those initial pops you're hearing, that's part of the plastic casing coming off. It's actually not chip out. It is something you would expect when you start the initial turning with this type of casting system. Alright, so now you can get a better look at what these dots look like. Pretty sure there's some more in there, just a little buried deep in there in the resin, so this will become a little more dot rich as we get going here. But I like to stop, especially when I'm using new products and new materials, to just kind of see how the progress is going. And I got to tell you, this is impressive so far. The material inside the aluminum tubes is holding out, and we're getting a really nice cut on this. So I think we're good. I'm gonna change to my smaller skew, which is also a little sharper skew. This one here, and let's see if we can finish this out. Again, always a good idea to pause here and there when you're working with something that's new and take a look at what's happening. See if you see anything dangerous starting to happen or something wrong with the way you're working your tool that might cause a future problem. One of the things that you normally see me do as I'm working with my blanks is I'm usually touching it quite a bit, and I've grown accustomed to being able to feel how things are progressing. A little paranoid doing this because, as you can see, there's all these tiny little aluminum shards everywhere, and I really don't want to shoot a piece of aluminum up into my hand, so we're just going to have to do this by sight alone. And the other thing, I'm getting a fair amount of vibration, and I think some of that is due to the aluminum here, and the other is due to the fact that it seems to be dulling my tools pretty quick. So I'm going to take a pause here and go sharpen, and we'll be right back. Alright, so got a nice edge back on this skew. Let's fire up the lathe and get going here. I do want to make one mention of just general safety. I am wearing a face shield. I've got aluminum tubes that are glued to a tube in here. The lathe is spinning at 4,200 RPMs. I really am not interested in having one of these things hitting me in the face. So for the small amount of inconvenience that a face shield has, it is a huge amount of protection and can save you a lot of pain, discomfort, and embarrassment. So highly recommend it. All right, let's go. Alright, sorry if you couldn't hear me a little bit in that last talking point. I forgot to put the microphone on my shirt, so my apologies. This is really coming out neat. I'm really happy with this. We're down to the last little bits. I will tell you, it's driving me nuts not being able to feel this while it's spinning, so I can see where I'm at on my bushings. But I like the profile. I'm more of a nice straight lines type of person as opposed to bulbous stuff. You got to do what you like and what people you give and sell these things to like. But I think we're looking pretty good here. do notice that right here, it looks like I lost a little bit of the polymer clay filling on this low part. And this was a concern that when we get down to the last little bits here, how these things will hold on. But I think they're holding on pretty good. I'm going to do a CA finish on this because I have exposed clay here. It's not going to polish very well. So I will do a typical sanding process here, and then just put a CA finish on top to make it look pretty. And I think that CA will probably fill in this crack quite well. We still got a little bit of material to take off here, so we'll get close to that. Otherwise, I think we're good to go. So hopefully I can finish it up with a few more passes here. Alright, so I think we're where we need to be using the tool. And I think I'm going to just finish the profile here with some 80 grit sandpaper, and then I'll move to your traditional sanding grits for sanding pin turning type of stuff. And then we'll take these bushings off, we'll put on our CA finished bushings, and we'll get set up for that process. So let's get to sanding. Now I will tell you, when I sand the acrylic stuff, I slow my lathe way down. So now I'm going to be sanding around 1700 RPM. Like I say in all my videos, heat is your worst enemy here. So you don't want to be generating a tremendous amount of heat. So light passes, try not to take off too much with the sandpaper, and just trying to deal with these pits and valleys. Some places where I may have cut a little deeper than others, so that the finished pen has a nice smooth finish, and it doesn't have peaks and valleys that just wouldn't feel nice. All right, so let's get started. Alright, so got this sanded really nice. Now one of the things I've noticed here is some of the brighter polymer clays become a little dull in color because of the dust from the aluminum. So what I'm going to do is get myself a clean rag here and some denatured alcohol and give this a real quick wipe, and hopefully we can get that stuff cleaned up. This is not a bad idea to do on a regular basis anyways. See how much dirt we took off of there? Before you apply any finish, make sure your piece is clean of dust, dirt, any oils that might be embedded, and anything like olive oil, olive wood, and the like that are very oily woods. You certainly don't want to trap that stuff under a beautiful finish. So what I like to do in this scenario is I'm going to keep cleaning until my rag pretty much comes back dry, or not dry, but not showing me any more dirt and dust and whatnot. And for all of you out there that do this a lot, everybody knows all the extra work you do up front is what pays off in the end. So we're using Abranet sanding strips here. The first was 80 grit, just typical aluminum oxide sandpaper, and then we went to the Abranets and we did the 180, the 240, the 320, the 400, and 500. And that's generally as far as we need to go. Now, a lot of times with the acrylics, I would wet sand these, and I don't know if that's something I want to do in this scenario because of the water getting into the crevices of the polymer clay and making it not look so good. But I'm looking at this and I'm not so sure I'm going to get really quite the finish I want if I don't do that. So you know what, I'm gonna do this, and instead of doing the whole process here at once, I'm just gonna do like 1500 and then wipe it down and see how it looks. I think that we're going to be okay with this, so I'm going to move through the rest of my micro mesh pads here, my micro mesh wet sanding pads. I think what I'm going to do is just in between pads, just wipe off the dirty water. If you notice, it comes off completely gray like that. That's just the water mixing with the aluminum that's getting sanded off in this process. So instead of having an abundance of this build up, I'll just do it in between. So let's go through the grits on the micro mesh. So as I was originally concerned, I can see, especially here, like this orange piece, the dirty water from the wet sanding process is kind of soaked in there. I don't think it's a terrible thing, a little bit of character to the blank, but I am going to give it a little bit of a try real quick. I'm going to take a step up from denatured alcohol, or DNA, and we're going to give this a little tap real quick in that area with some acetone. Now you got to be careful with this, because acetone, same stuff people use to take their nail polish off, and it is a pretty potent solvent. And as you can see, it's pulling off some more dirt, which is great. You want to be careful when you use this that you're in a well ventilated area. It is highly flammable. Not to mention, it evaporates almost instantaneously. So if you're using a lot of it, it gets into the atmosphere very fast and finds a point of ignition, and you have a really bad day. Alright, so I'm happy with that. I think this came out really nice. So we're going to get the lathe reconfigured here for churning with CA, as I don't want to glue this to my bushings. That's just annoying. And I'm also going to let this dry for just a few minutes. One good thing about being up here in the Northeast in the winter is right now, because it is so cold outside, my shop heater is running all the time. My shop's sitting at about 13% humidity right now. So nothing stays wet long in the shop. But before I put my CA finish on here and lock in any potential moisture, which is just going to give me a bad outcome, I'm going to let this dry. So while this is drying, clean up my micro mesh pads, because we're going to need them again to finish the CA finish, and just kind of get reconfigured here on the lathe. For those of you that might be watching this and are new to turning, these micro mesh pads are the best thing for doing your finishing on acrylics. Starts at 1500 grit and goes up to 12,000 grit. I use them wet. The water helps break down the friction and the heat, and just kind of helps the sandpaper move across the surface a little better and not cause problems. I do this with all of my acrylics. Next step after this would be like a plastic polish, but that's just not going to be necessary here, because I'm going to put CA over the top of it. So I'm going to stop the video, get reconfigured, and we'll be right back. Alright, we're set up and ready for our CA finish. I have my CA bushings on here. These are great. The CA glue doesn't stick very well to them, and the tube is generally easy to separate. It's conical, so the way it goes in there really kind of prevents the glue from creating a solid bond with the bushings. I've got a paper towel down on my lathe bed so that I don't get super glue all over it, or CA glue all over it. What we're going to do today, I'm a big fan of the Mercury Adhesives products. We're going to do 4 coats of thin, and then we are going to do 4 coats of medium. We're going to use the aerosol accelerant from them. Real quick bursts in between each coat to build up a nice finish. And I just dropped everything on the floor. And generally 8 coats is plenty fine for the type of work that we're trying, or the outcome that we're searching for here. One of the things that's very important, and it's something I forgot to do, so I'm going to do it while I'm talking here, is you really want to slow down your lathe. I do not like applying CA over 500 RPM, and the reason for that is if you get it going too fast, it just flings off the tube, and it also causes the glue to expand and get these high ridges, and it just elongates your sanding process and it can be hard to deal with. So slow your lathe down. I go no more than 500 RPM on this when I do that. So I use some shop towels. I cut them up into little strips. And the process is I'm going to put a couple of drops, small drops, on a folded up piece like this. And I'm just going to quickly pass it back and forth a couple times. Don't want to linger. If this dries, the cloth comes out of your hand and it's now glued to here, and you got to start the sanding process all over again. And then I'll do the same thing with the next piece, except what I do is I start half folded. I'll wipe back and forth on the blank just a little bit, and then I'll fold and apply the CA. And the reason for that is I don't want any of that aerosol accelerant that I've sprayed on there to remain in a liquid form between coats. If that happens, I'm going to get white, blooming type of puffy look underneath my finish, and it's just going to ruin it. It's not going to give us a good outcome. So wipe, fold, glue, wipe, spray. And that's where we're going to go. Generally, before I get started, I make sure the caps of my CA are ready to come off. Sometimes they get stuck on there really well. So I just want to make sure I don't have to deal with this before we get started, and I don't. All right, so let's get our CA finish going here. All right, so we've got ourselves a nice CA application here. Notice that this one little dot at the very end, I have a bit of a gap that didn't get filled in the application process. So I am just going to apply a little extra CA right here. and that will, it's sanded down in the sanding process. Now because I just put a big glob of glue on here, it's going to need some time to cure. So we're going to have to wait a few seconds here for that. Now a couple things you want to be very cognizant of when working with CA. You want to try to keep the CA away from your finger. You certainly don't want to glue anything to it. It's incredibly uncomfortable removing it. If you do, that acetone that I showed you earlier is a great tool for getting that off. The other thing is, you're sitting here, we're working with accelerant, all right? Speed means heat. It's the same thing goes with the CA. When you hit this with accelerant, if you've got glue on your finger and you get it with the accelerant, the curing is so rapid and so fast, generates so much heat, it will literally burn your finger. And it's incredibly uncomfortable because you can't get it off while it's burning your finger. So do your best to keep your fingers clean of CA. If you work with the paper towels in the way I showed you, you should have a good outcome. Now what generally I do is I work with the Abranet pad to get the CA finish completely smooth. It's hard to tell in the camera, but there are little ridges where it's high and low. So while this is churning, I'm just going to lightly sand it, and what's going to happen is the high points are going to get a bit cloudy and the low points will stay shiny. And it'll be very obvious where that is. And I'm just going to keep working the sandpaper back and forth until I have a nice, even, cloudy coat across. I don't want to press hard because the finish here is only, it's microscopic basically. If I push too hard, I can easily take it off. I also don't want to spin fast because it's the same thing. So we're going to be doing this sanding at about 250 RPM. It's going to take a little bit of time, but this is what's going to help us get the best outcome. Really, my goal here is to see this whole blank cloudy white. A few remaining high points here that I am just going to sand out locally, and I have that one spot where I applied the drop of CA to fill in that gap, and I'm just going to spend a few seconds working that down. Get a good finish on there too. I'm trying to keep the sandpaper in just that area so that I don't take the finish off the surrounding areas. Might be a little difficult to see the bump here in the video, but it is present and we certainly don't want that to be too high. We're going to come back and we're going to wet sand again, and that is what's going to give this CA a finish. And if we've got bumps, you're going to have parts of the blank where the CA finish is the micro mesh pads aren't going to polish, and we want a nice shiny uniform finish here for these beautiful dots. Okay, I think we're good. We're going to grab our micro mesh pads and get back to wet sanding. all CA'd up here, we have a beautiful, shiny, smooth finish. Very nice to the touch and looks really pretty. This really came out nice. Really happy with this. So I'm going to turn the lathe back on. I'm going to hit it real quick with a little plastic polish. I like to use the Hut polish, which is the Hut Ultra Gloss. I think this really kind of just takes the finish up one extra layer. So our dot project is now done. I think the outcome is really neat. This is going to make for one fun looking pen. Not too many pens you find that have polymer clay, aluminum, and liquid diamonds all in the same blank. This was a fun project to work on. Had some fears about it, but turned out really nice. So I want to thank Steven Antonucci for collaborating with me on this. He meticulously glued every single one of these dots to the tube, I think while entertaining himself on a couple football games, and then sent them to me for casting. And I cast it with this brown colored Alumilite. So I hope you enjoyed this. I hope this project helped give you some ideas and shows you some of the fun things you can do